Hello and welcome to another episode of Truth and Courage Under Fire. You can see today I've got the wife again, or she's got the husband. Take your pick. Philip will be back, I think, on Friday, and we'll be recording a couple of future episodes.
Being a pastor, you never know what your hours are going to be.
And Christmas is upon us, and we've got this massive, super cold front that's sweeping east. We're down here in Georgia, and they're talking on Friday night temperature of 12 degrees.
And we have poultry. We have chickens, ducks, geese, and swans.
Yeah, so it's going to be, we're getting in preparations for that. And of course, Christmas is coming up this weekend. So, today's show, though, we're going to cover, I think, some health issues. I got a couple of quick current events here that we're going to talk about just briefly, just to bring you up to speed on. And then Linda's going to talk some. One of the things with health-related issues is we still have, with the vaccines, emergency use authorization. The administration just continues to refuse to normalize that process, and I think that's a travesty. It's still protecting big pharma and probably the government to some extent from the adverse side effects that increasingly knowledge is coming out that the vaccine is really bad in a lot of ways.
Now, what does normalize mean? They refuse to normalize.
Well, just return it back to the legal system. Currently, emergency use authorization, it protects the administrators, the hospitals, and the vaccine manufacturers and whatnot from being sued. You know, there's the problem with the vaccine from the very beginning is we were not given informed consent. There were tons and tons of adverse effects, and the doctors were not presented with all the different after effects, and they didn't brief patients properly on the after effects. And the government, of course, heavy-handedly required everybody to get vaccinated. That was while working in the government. Now that's reversing a little bit. The Department of Defense budget that just came out says specifically that the soldiers, sailors, and Marines, airmen will not have to get vaccinated. Yes. It's not mandatory anymore. So that may help retention, and it may also help recruitment, which has kind of gone off the rails a little bit. The only thing I really don't like as a retired Navy veteran is that they're not bringing the people back who conscientiously objected to that on religious grounds.
But there's some senators talking about that they want to see that done.
Yeah, they have to kind of, it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a fight. And eventually, you'd like to think there's going to be a compromise, but I think it has to begin with getting rid of Lloyd Austin. He's just been terrible. You know, this woke censorship.
Now, who's Lloyd Austin?
He's the head of the Department of Defense. He is Biden's appointee, and he's been, carrying his water from day one. And he is all for the woke stuff. They want to indoctrinate the military. They want to change the way it does things. How you have a cohesive fighting force in the face of the diversity that they're looking for, I can't imagine. I just don't see how that's going to work. But
I often think of how your father and my grandfather, who all fought in wars, would feel about this.
Yeah.
That boy, when war happens, they want people standing next to them that are strong, committed.
It's going to be interesting to see how that, from the military standpoint. The other, by the way, current event stuff is that I just heard a factoid this morning that Zelensky is coming over from Ukraine. He wants more money, he wants more weapons, and he's going to meet with Biden and select leaders and talk about getting more support for the war against Russia. And with the commitment that our DOD bill that's being signed and passed, in a typical fiscal year, the United States taxpayers pay so much money to the Department of Defense to, maintain its operations and upgrade and do whatever it needs to do. We will, if we approve and the money goes through for Ukraine, over 10% of 1 year's worth of Department of Defense budget will be going to Ukraine.
10%.
10%.
Now, didn't you tell me, though, some of that money they can't even account for?
Oh, yeah. Tons of it. They can't.
Billions.
Yeah.
They can't account for.
Yeah. It goes in a dark hole. I talked in a previous episode about FTX's collapse. so that some of that involved, and I've heard that reported again, that money goes over there and then they submit to FTX and it becomes a digital currency that's unaccounted for. And I think, going back to fill the pockets of people back in this country and other people in that country. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So, but anyhow, that's something else. So we have the emergency use authorization still in effect. We have unknown long-term side effects are still unknown. And I don't know about you, but when I look at like USA Today and I look at the Epoch Times and I look at the Daily Caller and I look at the news to CNBC or Fox News Business Channel, one of the other things is I see a lot more well-known personalities dying from heart-related issues. Mm-hmm. There were a couple more this morning. You look at them, you go, okay, well, you were definitely overweight, but you're dying at 50 or 45, and that's to go along with all of the obviously healthy people who have just collapsed and fallen over dead. Mm-hmm. So at least that's starting to come out a little bit more. One of the issues out of that, before we get into what you're talking about there, is again, something else I saw this morning, is that people that go to the hospital and for whatever surgery or whatever's going on there, increasingly people do not want to be infused with blood from somebody that has been vaccinated. Mm-hmm. And they're saying, well, we don't want that. So,
well, what terrifies me is I heard a nurse give an interview where she said that she was an OR nurse, worked in the operating room, and she quit because in her hospital they were vaccinating patients when they're under anesthetic without their permission. Mm-hmm. And she tried to report it and they shut her down, so she quit. Mm-hmm. So it's scary, but we need wisdom and we need prayer and we need knowledge. God says his people, for the lack of knowledge, they die. Now, I know that's out of context, but the truth is the truth. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So,
there's a pathologist, Dr. Ryan Cole, is one of the people that in the article I read this morning said that the comparison should be made to the tainted HIV blood.
Oh,
so that's what people are worried about. So there's a safe blood donation campaign to match blood donors and types, but here's the problems. It's unknown whether blood donated by people who've received the vaccine pose a risk. Mm-hmm. We just don't have any studies on that, so we don't know what's going on. So people are going, okay, my 2-year-old's going into the hospital and is going to need a blood transfusion, and we don't want to take the risk that this 2-year-old is going to be contaminated. Or
there was a case someplace where they took the child away.
They did that in New Zealand. Is one of the cases where they did that.
They'd have to kill me first.
Yeah, I'm looking for the specific quote in here. The dangers of online misinformation. Oh yeah. So. In New Zealand, the 2-year-old had to have an operation. The parents said, we don't want to do that. The child needed the operation. The government literally took the 2-year-old away and said, we're going to vaccinate the kid and operate on the kid. So, that's just a horrible thing to consider. And then the other thing is that with regard to vaccinations, and I'll kick it over to you, is the mortuaries are starting to speak up.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
They're finding...
Remember, what was died suddenly? Was that it? Stu Peters.
Oh, that's one of them,
Yeah, where they take you into
and until proven otherwise is the other one.
Yeah, they take you in as they're doing autopsies and showing you what comes out, what they're pulling out of people. So again, we always say, don't bank on what we're saying. You go research it for yourself and make sure that we're telling you what's the truth. Mm-hmm. So what I want to talk about, because one of the things, because of this time of year, is aluminum, which, by the way, they have put in vaccines since 1930s, 40s, 50s for diphtheria, those kinds of things.
And it's not in the COVID shot, though, I don't think.
The Novavax. It's in the Novavax. Okay. And it is called which is a new term for us, where is it? What did I tell you? It was an
I know, if I don't know what the word is. I said, if I don't know it, you probably ought to use something else.
Yeah, an adjuvant, that's what it is, which is simply said, it makes the vaccine work better. And but one of the things they use in that is aluminum. But mainly because this time of season I want to talk about is how many things have aluminum in them. And I remember a number of years ago, I saw something on YouTube that reported that 100% of the autopsies on Alzheimer's patients, the brains that this group did, had, what are you looking at me like that for? I'm gonna.
When you were talking about that, I'm thinking of talcum powder.
Yeah. So anyway, 100% of the autopsies they did on Alzheimer's patients had aluminum in the brain, and I went back to grab it so I could copy it, and it had been wiped. And that was a number of years ago. Well, last week, all of a sudden, I think it was Epoch Times came out with an article. There's, more and more truth is starting to come out now. More and more people are saying, no, we're going to tell the truth. And so it was a really good article about aluminum. And this professor who had published over 200 peer-reviewed articles, which means other researchers had read his stuff and said, yes, he's spot on. And he started verifying the...
It's not a conspiracy theory.
No, it's not a conspiracy theory. The dangers of aluminum. And the university cut off all his funding. So in essence...
They do that a lot.
They cut off all his funding so he couldn't... and he said that they have found that aluminum, abnormally high amounts of aluminum in the brains of patients with autism, aluminum in the human breast tissue. Now think about it, where was autism years ago? All of a sudden autism popped up.
Several things like that.
So what I wanted to say to you is be careful this time of year. Makes me crazy when I go into the grocery stores and I see folks buying those little aluminum pans to cook in. Now, when aluminum is heated, I can taste it. You're eating aluminum. When somebody cooks something in a pan and you eat it, you're eating aluminum. I wouldn't touch those things with a 10-foot pole. Cookie sheets, something you don't think about. We went out and bought a stainless steel cookie sheet. Cost us $60, but when somebody says, oh, I think you're getting Alzheimer's or have Alzheimer's, you wish you'd spent that $60 on that cookie sheet because you use it all the time for rolls, for just about everything. And then something we don't think about that I wanted to point out is your deodorants. Your body is the biggest orifice that you have. And so, I'm going to tear you up. And so I will not use a deodorant that doesn't say aluminum free. And you can find them. Now, you'll have to see which one works for you. Jason's doesn't work for me, but this is a Arm & Hammer. That works great. This is another one, charcoal magnesium, works wonderfully. So just be very aware of aluminum. Not just this time of year, but any other time, because, man, we're fighting for our health today. We are all fighting for our health. So, man, I'm on this aluminum thing.
Yeah, just don't become like the French.
The French. Did you get enough sleep last night?
They don't use any. So, so many of them run around smelling because they don't use... Anyhow, we'll be back in just a couple minutes, and we'll continue our conversation. Stay tuned. Well, Linda was talking about the dangers of aluminum, and I made a snide comment about the French and their lack of hygiene when it comes to deodorant. But anyhow, she has a couple more remarks she'd like to make about that. So we're going to kick it over to you, and you can just go ahead.
I tell you,
knock yourself out.
Keep saying it's a good thing you're cute. That's all I got to say. But the aluminum is really a serious issue, and I wanted to. This is on CDC's own website, cdc.gov, if you want to find it. It said aluminum in adjuvant form carries the risk for autoimmunity, long-term brain inflammation, and associated neurological complications, and may thus have profound and widespread adverse health consequences. Aluminum. And then finally, the professor that Keele University yanked off his funding, Dr. George Perry, one of the world's leading Alzheimer's researchers and editor-in-chief of the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, issued a press release calling Exley's work a landmark piece of research in the field. So,
better late than never.
Better late than never.
You know, the FDA just finally acknowledged that Pfizer causes blood clots.
There you go.
They finally said it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only taken them 2 years, but...
But you've got to do your research also, because major networks are not going to report this. And if you don't do your research, then what happens to you is on you. Yeah. So, but I appreciate you. I'm so fired up about this thing. I said, Tom, I'll shoot you like a dog if you don't let me share this.
Yeah. Well, the blood clot thing was what was bothering me, as we stay on health issues here a little bit. But here's an example. I told you the New Zealand case where they took the child from the parents. In the United States, a lot of that is going on, and it's really concerning that, in the public school systems, they want kids to report on their parents, and they want to take the kids away or give them rights and not notify them. But here's an example, the blood clot thing. In Sacred Heart Hospital in Washington, they erased all the records and the death of a child, and baby Alex. He had a blood clot after receiving a transfusion from a vaccinated, mRNA vaccinated patient. There's no evidence of a problem anymore. They completely expunged and erased the records. The CDC also erased all data linking vaccines to autism.
There you go.
So this is
well, just to let
crazy.
You know, Tom and I spend hours. If you go back when this whole thing started about 2.5 years ago, we have literally spent hundreds of hours researching. And I just think it's exciting that finally now more and more people are standing up.
I try to stay current, and the word gets out more than it used to. It was so horribly suppressed. On a future episode, I'm going to the latest and greatest on the Twitter files release. Elon Musk is doing a great service.
Yes.
For the country. I think he's also being really smart because he's doing this delayed release thing. It reminds me of Donald Trump. The reason that the media and the Democrats hate him so much is that he ran a presidential campaign on a shoestring, and he completely played social media. I mean, they could not get enough of ridiculing him and making fun of his campaign.
So he didn't have to pay for advertising.
He just kept saying things, and they kept putting him on the air, and I mean, he just got massive amounts of free publicity. Yeah. So, and I think that Elon Musk is doing the same thing. He wants to regenerate a following and customers for the service. And I think his release of this stuff is just another one of the, time will tell, but I think it's one of those brilliant things to promote Twitter.
Well, I got tickled when Google's threatening to take him off, cut Twitter off. And he said, fine, I'll just start my own Google.
Yeah. He's running into some financial difficulties in the stock market. A lot of people, Tesla shares are way down, which is his bread and butter. Yeah. Where his wealth comes from, but I just wouldn't bet against him. And
keep praying for him. Yeah,
and the SpaceX thing, he's so integral to our efforts in space that he'll be fine. But
well, there's a whole lot of prayer going on him. Yeah. So
you wanted to kick over to something about the Supreme Court's got a lot of interesting cases that it's looking at right now, and you wanted to cover something in particular.
I am so fired up about this. Now, we've had a lot of things I don't think it takes a genius to figure out we're in trouble in this nation. We are in trouble, and if things don't change, and we're not sure exactly the tool that God's going to use, everybody's speculating. What tool is God going to use to turn this whole thing around? Well, this gives me personally more hope than I've had in most things. All right.
And probably the reason that the Democrats want to pack the court is another example of why.
Exactly. Okay, so 4 brothers called the Brunson brothers. And I think it's hilarious that, as for a profession, they're trumpeters. Truly, go look on every show you can think of, Johnny Carson, all that, and you'll see the trumpeters. And anyway, so
they play the instrument.
They play the instrument, yeah. So anyway, the point is that they decided, two of the brothers decided they were going to file lawsuits, not overturning the election, the 2020 election, not that, but the fact that, all right, let me back up and tell you. In 1866, there was a similar case where there was interference with the election. And so the Supreme Court made a ruling then that they had to take 45 days to investigate before they, before they certified the election. And then Donald Trump made an executive order in 2018 that if there was any suggestion of foreign interference, that they were going to have to take a period of time to investigate before they certified the election. Not overturn it, but they just had to investigate. So Senator Cruz, before they certified the election, said, now wait a minute, we've got 100 legislators that say they have absolute proof that there was foreign interference in our election. And so since a precedent had been set back in 1866, and because of that executive order, that before this election is certified, we need to take a 10-day period, just pause, stop, not overturn, but just pause and investigate to see if there was foreign interference. And the 100 legislators had proof of it. And if you've seen anything that Mike Lindell's had in all of these internationally known computer forensics guys, boy, they can just draw the lines on where everything went back and forth from China, Germany, Italy during the election. But that's all they're saying, is there should have been an investigation. And so Ted Cruz and the 100 other legislators said, no, wait, let's pause. Not overturn, let's just pause before you certify. Well, they refused to do it, and Mike Pence certified it. So what the Brunson brothers have done is they have filed a lawsuit that they did not follow the precedent that had been set and the executive order, and pause. And so they filed a lawsuit against 385 legislators, including Mike Pence, Kamala Harris, and Joe Biden, that they did not investigate it. And they're asking in this that those that certified, quote unquote, illegally, that they be removed from office and they never be permitted to hold office again. Now you say, yeah, likely chance that's ever going to happen, that, you know, they're ever going to get that case heard. Well, they filed in the Second Circuit and they filed in the 10th Circuit, and figuring that if they filed two different places, you know, maybe one would stand a better chance.
Well, the first filing was held up.
It was held up, and in the 10th,
they just couldn't get out of the circuit.
That's right. They couldn't get, well, the 10th, they had a similar problem. They just couldn't get an answer, and they had to have an answer, even if it was no, in order to get up to the Supreme Court. So it wasn't getting any place. So they got together and said, you know, there's got to be some way. And long story short, they came up with a thing that that you could bypass the circuit court if it came under national security. So they did that. Well, the Supreme Court heard about it, and the clerk of the Supreme Court. Now, the clerk for 11 years, was the attorney for the Supreme Court, and now she's the clerk. She called them and said, how soon can you get all your information? It's got to be just right and bound just right and all this. How soon can you get that to us? And they finally got it down to 2 weeks, and she said, if you can do better, you get it to us as fast as you can. That's unheard of, that they didn't have to have any resolution with the circuit court. And so there's a lot involved, but one of the things that just tickles me to pieces is that the attorney handling the cases for the 385 defendants had something like 30 days to respond to why it should be dropped, why it should be a non-issue and it never get to the Supreme Court. And they didn't file until the day it was due and came back and said, we're not going to fight it. Now that's interesting. Because I think somebody said, and it was funny, that if that was your attorney, sue them if they did. But they did that. And the speculation is they either felt it was beneath them or they knew they had no defense. I mean, they either did it or they didn't. And so it now is scheduled for committee. In other words, the Supreme Court meets, I think it's every Friday, but they can meet anytime to determine what cases they're actually going to hear and adjudicate on. And it only takes 4 justices to be able to move that on to actually be heard before the Supreme Court. And so they set them for committee. And, you know, when they set it for, I just chuckle. January 6th. I just thought that was so funny. But the point is that, oh, I know, and then a gal had a dream. A girl that moves in the prophetic had a dream way before this. I don't know. Ask me tomorrow, I'll tell you something else. A year ago or something like that, where she said she saw the top of the Capitol open up and she saw 2/3 were missing. And then she saw a nurse walk in and take her seat. Then she saw a farmer walk in and take his seat. And I tell you, glory to God, wouldn't that be something if our legislators were just normal, everyday people? Not people that made a career out of this stuff, but just normal, everyday people. So, you know, I'm excited. God is committed to this nation. He sees the evil that's going on in this nation. And I've been on prayer calls where there were 500,000 people on those prayer calls. Even folks from Iran, Philippines, Australia saying, we're praying for America, because if America goes down, there's no hope for us. So God's going to do something. And maybe, just maybe, this is a vehicle He's going to use. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get party blowers ready. And that thing gets to the Supreme Court and they make a decision. You better be all prayed up, because I'm going to be running up and down the streets blowing my little party. I mean, truly. You still love me?
Wow. Well, I can save my notes for the next episode. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, you may not have me back, so I had to get that puppy in. I mean, for those, we're unashamedly conservatives. We don't apologize for that. If you're not, you don't like what we say, then start your own show, right? But we just want to tell you the truth and have you be encouraged and have knowledge.
Well, having said that, now she's going to make me take her to lunch.
You weren't kidding.
Okay, we've been successful. So thanks for tuning in. We'll hope you come back and see us again real soon. And I hope you have a wonderful Christmas. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Yes.